for those of you that are joining us, thank you very much. This webinar, it's titled Buying and Selling in Today's Market, and our market seems to be ever changing. And, just based on the conversations that we're having with our colleagues and with our own clients, there seems to be, I don't know, maybe some mixed messages out there, and just a lack of clarity in a sense. So we wanted to put on this webinar and just try and help shine some light on some things here. So just to introduce ourselves, my name is Glenn Feldstein. We are all real estate advisors with Angle Invokers on the same team. And I've been a licensed realtor since 2005.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany White. I have been licensed since, almost 15 years now. And yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Galia Horwitz, and I have been working with Glenn and Brittany for just over a year now. And I will pass it back to you, Glenn.
Great. Okay, so just the agenda here. So this is basically what we want to cover today. We're going to, take a look at the market, kind of the market that we came from. We're going to look at obviously what's going on right now. We're going to talk about some strategies for buyers and for sellers. And we're going to talk about this home buyer's rescission period, also known as cooling off period. So that's going to come into effect January of next year. So we'll explain what that is. And then we'll talk about what we see, what we think is going to happen, sort of kind of our forecast and the opportunities that are out there today and down the road. So Brittany, how about you kick us off here with what's market at a glance? So what kind of market did we just come from?
Well, we came from a very different market. Maybe I'll just start a little bit at the beginning, just because if not a lot of people know what's happened in the prior 2 years, it's probably a good information to know how we got here. In 2019, we saw a market slowdown, likely from buyer fatigue of having another couple of years of an up-paced market. And I would say in 2019, it slowed down considerably. And then we saw an uptick happening around actually Christmas time of 2019. So we had a lot of people just sitting there waiting to get back in the market. So by end of 2019, we were starting to see multiple offers happen again. By 2020, at the beginning, we were seeing those multiple offers happening quite frequently. And then all of a sudden in March, we all know what happened, the pandemic. So all of a sudden for 6 weeks, none of us did anything, right? Nobody knew what we were going to do. Everybody was sort of in that motion of just staying put and just listening. So we had a lot of people that had already sold their property and were waiting to buy. And then all of a sudden they had an extra, 6 to 8 weeks where they weren't able to do anything. And then we had this backlog from 2019 of people not moving as well too. And then everybody's situation changed. People needing more space, not wanting to live in the city, going out to the suburbs, needing an office space because of working from home and so forth. So we had a lot of movement. Everybody's 5-year plans turned into their 6-month plans. So we had a lot of movement happen in the marketplace quite fast, quite frankly. And that May of 2020, we saw it rise up quite quickly. So we have all of a sudden all these buyers in the marketplace and not a lot of sellers due to just the lack of inventory that we've seen over how many years. Even since I've been in the marketplace for the last 15 years, it's always been a lower inventory. And then all of a sudden we have this rush of buyers come in. So what do we see? The demand outpaces the supply and we see multiple offers. So when we talk about multiple offers, there was lots of blind bidding. And when we talk about blind bidding, it means people not knowing what the other people were bidding. That's what we mean. They go in blind, right? We don't know what that other offer looks like. So when we talk, so blind bidding doesn't mean that people weren't doing their due diligence. They were still doing their due diligence. It was just happening beforehand instead of after.
I mean, granted, there's probably were some people out there that were making offers without doing that, but I still hear that from some people that people were making uneducated offers in a sense. They didn't know what they were buying. Our clients, we always got them the information they needed ahead of time, so they knew what was going on.
Exactly.
Apart from the auction site type setting, but no.
Exactly. So with the blind bidding, we were seeing a lot of offers per home. And a lot of people were then buying before they were selling because homes were selling in a week. So they wanted to know where they were going before they sold, because they knew that they could sell their property quite quickly. So that is what, in a little bit of a nutshell, that's what we have seen over the past couple of years.
Okay, perfect. So let's sort of, I mean, these graphs here just outline a little bit of typically what's happened from you know, in the last 12 plus months. So, you know, one thing that we look at to determine the type of market that we're in is sales to active listings ratio. So, you know, right now I think a lot of people are calling for or calling this a buyer's market, and in a lot of circumstances it is, but most areas seem to be fairly balanced. So I mean, you know, with the high point of that graph right here, that's very much a seller's market. So anything kind of over this line would be, you know, considered a seller's market. Anything, you know, a little bit below would be balanced, and then even further, you know, less than 15% would be considered a buyer's market. So this is kind of just showing where we're, you know, where things are now, where we came from, and where we are now. And the average percent of the sale price or listing price, again, this just sort of echoes what Brittany was talking about, you know, with the competing situations. A lot of properties, nearly all of them in a competing situation, would sell for over the asking price, right? So now we're not seeing that as much, of course, right? I mean, we're still seeing some competing situations, but, you know, people are able to negotiate a little bit. And how much over the asking, it all depends on what the seller what price they put their property on at. You know, the asking price is not the value of the home. It's just it's the marketing price. It's kind of like the seller going first and saying, this is what I want from my place. So some places would sell way over asking. And that's just because they were priced really low in most circumstances, right? And now if something sells way below, it's just because they're priced pretty high. So
yeah, and that's where you can see it in the second graph. You can see the average percentage of sale price to listing price. And that's where, you know, where you can see the drop, or it looks like it goes way down, but it's just showing that there is some negotiating happening now rather than it going up and up and up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so Galia, let's talk about what's going on in the market right now. What are we seeing today? What's happening right now?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously right now, what we saw the last 2 years was very different. And right now we're hearing a lot in the news, in the media, of a bit of a frenzy, some fear that's brought up around the housing market. Right now, we're seeing that supply is actually outpacing demand. And that's not necessarily because we have extra inventory right now. It's just that demand has suffered quite a bit. Right now, houses, apartments, condos that were on the market maybe for a week in previous markets, we're seeing sit on the market for 3 to 4 weeks. Now, that's not saying that in no cases are there multiple offer scenarios or competition on certain properties. When a property is really good, is really strong, checks a lot of the boxes, not many objections, we still are seeing multiple offer scenarios, which is why it's important as a buyer in those scenarios, when you see something really good, to still step up and put your best offer forward. Although you do have a little bit more time now to shop around, take extra time for due diligence and really feel out what you are looking for and find that perfect property without having the rush and having a little bit of that luxury of time. So because supply is outpacing demand, what happens in that case scenario is that obviously prices start declining. So prices decline for a multitude of reasons. And on the next slide here, we're going to look at inflation versus interest rates in Canada over the last 25 years. As you can see here, the blue line is interest rates, while the dotted line is inflation. These two correspond very closely. As inflation rises, so do interest rates. And the reason being is the Bank of Canada, one of their main objectives is to control inflation. So what do? They increase interest rates. So if you go on to the next slide, it's a little closer, zoom in on what's happened this last year. Obviously, over about a year and a half ago, inflation really began to rise at quite a fast rate. And as such, interest rates have been rising at a quicker rate than we've seen in many, many years. Right now, what we're starting to see is because interest rates have risen so quickly, it's actually pricing some people at a lower bracket in the market, forcing prices down even more. What people used to qualify for 6 months ago is now not what they qualify now with the increase of interest rates. So due to this, it's also causing housing prices to decline a little bit. So now we're going to move on. I'll pass it back to you, Glenn.
Great. So buyer strategies. So, I mean, often most buyers are always curious to know like where to look for the good buys and the good deals and all that sort of stuff. Of course, when you're buying your principal residence, the place that you're going to live, you're going to be working within a certain budget. You're going to know the location that you want to live in and the type of property, right? So sometimes the budget's going to dictate the location and the type of property. So, you know, for what we're going to talk about here, sometimes we're still just handcuffed by our own budgets, right? So where to look for some good buys, right? So, I mean, if people are looking for kind of where to get the biggest, I guess, bump in equity or home values, I mean, typically neighborhoods that are kind of up and coming in a sense. So if there's maybe a couple new developments, but not much else is around there, you know, then over time that can, as more grocery and everything and restaurants and everything come into the neighborhood, you know, you can see an uptick in value there more so than maybe surrounding areas. You see a little more pop, I guess I should say. Any new transit or infrastructure. So, you know, Port Moody, when they put the Evergreen line in there, I mean, that was really attractive because there wasn't much going on around in that kind of village there in Klahani and that sort of thing. So that was good. And then, of course, anytime you're close to any parks and rec centers, that's obviously going to be good. So kind of looking at what the prices have done. This is all Greater Vancouver. The HPI is a housing price index. So the way it's described, it's a little bit better than average, but it's like what a typical property would likely sell for. So, you know, what's interesting about this is, you know, especially if you're right now a move up buyer, you know, the largest decline in prices has been in the detached market. So that's the top line there, the green line. And there hasn't been much fluctuation in apartments. And yeah, sure, a little bit in the townhouses there. So, I mean, I think what's interesting about this is, you know, from say the peak in April, and depending on the neighborhood and property type we're talking about, you know, the peak was kind of between March, April, May. So we've just decided to go in the middle there and use April. So since the peak in April, detached properties have come down 10%, townhouses 9%, and apartments 6.3%. But all those values are still up. So, you know, I feel like there's words being thrown around out there that, you know, the market's going to crash or it has crashed and all this sort of stuff. But when you're kind of looking at it like this, in our opinion, you know, yeah, we've got a good dip here and a significant dip. And sure, if you did buy in April, you've got a little bit of a dip there, but you know, these are long-term investments. And I think some people are losing sight of real estate being long-term. And that person that paid, you know, for a single family home, you know, HPI price, 2.1 million, they probably have a very low interest rate as well. So, you know, they're probably going to be okay for their 5-year term on that. Anything
I think it's fair to say that, if we sort of look at this graph, it actually sheds a little bit of light for people, especially people upgrading. So if you're coming from an apartment to a townhouse, we're looking at the spread is lower than where you were at the peaks of the market. Yeah, you were going to sell your house for a little bit more, but your townhouse is gone down more than your apartment has. So if you're looking at that, and vice versa for a townhouse, and if you're upgrading to a house, Mind you, this is a greater Vancouver spread. So each area is going to be so different. And of course, if anybody is interested in their area specifically, just reach out to us and we can help you with that. But if you look at the upgrade, it's actually, that's what I like to see at the graphs is that if you're upgrading, you're a family or a young professional couple that's going to their next step. I think if you look at the graphs right now, it's actually quite an interesting time for you.
Okay. Let's move on. So price point, kind of going back to earlier on, just talking about sales to active listings ratios. So you can kind of see where most of the action is, and that's in 750,000 or less, 36% sales to active listing ratio, which would be considered a seller's market. Going to the next price point there, still a little bit favoring the sellers, and then so on as we go to the bottom there. So you can kind of see where you can kind of see where most of the buyers are, right? So now, unfortunately, like I said earlier, our budgets are our budgets. So I think it's always most important to get into the market as opposed to waiting for certain things to happen. There's so many factors, and we're going to obviously touch on some of those right now. But basically what I'm saying is, if your budget's less than 750, don't let that 36% scare you. Okay, you're still going to be able to make a great buy. So looking for good deals out there, right now, and these deals are maybe a little bit easier to find. And of course, my definition of a deal might be different than yours. I think most people's definition of a deal is paying under market value for something. And in any market, that's going to be challenging. So it's more about what you can do with the property, or what issues the property has that you can overcome that maybe others don't want to. So, days on market is one of them. So, average days on market right now could be in the 30 to 45 day range, depending on property type and area. So anything that's been on the market outside of that, there's something going on with the property in my opinion, whether they're priced too high or whether there's just something, I don't know, maybe something with the view, something with the neighbors, there's just something going on there. So that kind of, takes us over to like distressed properties. So, finding a property that's been on the market for a little while and say, okay, well, why has this been on the market? And can I get past it or fix it or change it? Especially from a renovation point of view, not many people are willing to take on a renovation right now. Costs are obviously elevated, but it's more so if it's a significant renovation, like a kitchen and bathroom and that type of thing, you don't really want to be living through that. So most people aren't able to keep their current residence while they're renovating their next one. So a lot of buyers are just looking for that turnkey property, just unpack, move in, maybe a coat of paint, maybe some flooring, but beyond that. So if you're able to kind of get your ducks in a row and be prepared to take on a more significant renovation and that sort of thing, then you could find some good deals that way as well.
Definitely can. Not everybody has the stomach for a reno. So some people have done really well with it.
Yeah. Brittany, we just had a West End property that we sold as well. And it was maybe just over 30 days on the market, but our clients picked it up at a great price. But it needs a full on reno. And people just weren't really willing to do that. So
yeah.
Okay, let's plow ahead here. So, Brittany, so seller strategy.
Sellers.
Yeah. So what's the strategy now compared to before?
So being a seller in this marketplace can, I think we all get a little bit scared of the unknown, right? What we have control of. When we talked about before market, we knew it was going to sell pretty much right away. And that made a lot of sellers feel really comfortable. So what's your strategy now? What do you do? So I think it starts off with having the conversation of where am I going to go? If inventory is still low, what am I going to do, right? Am I going to sell and have a long close, which is definitely an option for people. And it makes people feel comfortable with knowing what price they're going to get for their property before they buy. But what we're also seeing right now is a lot of subject to sales. So that's going to give some people some comfort of knowing the house they're going to be in, and also know that they do need to sell their house before they actually have a binding contract with the property that they're buying. So you put a subject to sale in it. So most people are, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's just clear my throat, sorry.
Oh, I thought you were interjecting. I was like, that's fine. So what it is that we're sort of looking at, most people are selling before they're buying or putting a subject to sale. So I think those are two fair things to say that what people are doing these days. And you sort of have to decide what's the best decision for you. Some people can't hold on to two properties. So you may be able to buy before you sell. Everybody's situation is different.
Yeah. And there's certain stresses that come with it all. Of course, a lot of people, they don't really want to sell their house before they know where they're going. So of course, the subject to sale, I mean, I think the benefit of that is it's acceptable now. Maybe not to a property that's just hit the market, that's checks like everybody's box. You might have to wait, until the days on market pile up on that before the seller's willing to look at something. But with that, when you make that subject to sale offer, you just have to be really prepared to do whatever it takes to sell the property that you have. Because if you
got it.
There's going to be a time clause in your subject to sale offer. And, just for the purposes of this webinar, we won't get too into detail about that. But if you are unable to sell your property in the time frame that you asked for that condition to be, or the seller invokes a time clause on you, there's certain stresses that come along.
Definitely.
Right. So anyways,
buying and selling a house is not for the faint of heart. That's for sure. It's there's always a few things you have to work through. That's why you need to have a plan A and a plan B in place when you're buying and selling.
But I think the good thing is about, this market right now is like you have more options, right?
Yes.
And that does take off a lot of stress as well.
It really does. So when you're going, so say you have this subject to sale and you're going, okay, before you get into that, you're going to want to prep your house for getting ready to sell. So before we could put houses on the market and we could do all the small things and all, but some people were just throwing them on because they were selling for whatever condition that they were in. So you could get away with that before in the other market because of the lack of inventory to a point, obviously. But now you're going to want to do all those small things. You want to get your handyman in, you're going to want to fix those dents. You might want to get a fresh coat of paint. There's going to be more things that buyers, remember, have more time these days. So they're going to also be hyper-focused on the smaller stuff. So it's really important to do the small stuff that you're going, do I do it? We're suggesting to everyone, you should, because buyers are going to notice it. The next step would be, I guess, pricing your property to sell. And before, we would have sellers go, but I really want this number. And you knew the number wasn't there. You knew that it wasn't going to sell for that price, but you know what? Okay, let's just try. Let's hope for that emotional buyer to come in and give that extra price point and stay strong. But right now, there's no trying. If your home is very overpriced, it is going to sit there until you drop the price. So pricing your property is really important these days. The market is not going to tell you what the property is worth. You're going to have to do a great market evaluation on the home. Add in a little bit of room for negotiation as well, too. Let's not forget that, because if you're expecting a full price offer, that's your expectations are going to be pretty high. There's going to be buyers who everybody wants to come in and everybody wants to have a win. So you're going to have to price your property appropriately, but with still a little bit of room. And don't expect it to sell in the first week. We're still seeing some properties where people are under listing them, realizing they're not getting that price that their seller expected, and then they're relisting it for a higher price. That in this marketplace, you just can't do that anymore. And
I think it's I mean, everybody just gets used to a certain market, right? So even if you weren't buying or selling in the market before, that's sort of what you're used to. And especially sellers, even if they said, oh yeah, place is selling in a week. My friend sold their place in a week. We've been on for 14 days. Yes, relax. Like, it's okay. It's just a different market. So
what's wrong with the place? Nothing. Nothing's wrong with it.
So just try to keep that in mind. It's just
Yeah. So days on the market, we're seeing, as Galia said, we're seeing a lot more days on the market than we used to see, right? A week now, if we're on for 45 days, it's nothing that's wrong with the property. It's just taking the right buyer to come in. And, as Glenn always likes to say in our market evaluations, when we're telling everybody comes at once, when you list the property, everybody comes all at once, and every single buyer will see it in the marketplace that is in the market. And then after, if nobody bites at that one, then we're waiting for new buyers to come in the market that are looking for a property like this. So essentially, when you go through that next wave, who knows when the next wave will be? So if it's 45 days in the market, don't be concerned about the property, you know, or sellers as well too. Don't be concerned if you're on the market for a couple months.
Yeah.
And lastly, negotiating. So remember, as I said before, everybody wants a win. So buyers want to feel that they can have some money off, and sellers want to feel as well too that they're getting fair market value. So just also leaving some room in your price to have some negotiating. I always say that the best deal is when the buyer feels that they paid too much and the seller feels that they let it go for too little. That's your perfect deal. So those are just a couple little strategies for sellers these days. And also just keep calm. We had a great compliment from a client that we just sold their property, and she goes, I never felt pressured by you. I never felt pressured. You allowed me to make my own decisions, and you were confident, and you kept it going and the communication going. And I thought that was the best compliment we could have had, because that's what it is. If you keep calm in this marketplace and don't make rash decisions right away, just based on emotion and feeling uncomfortable, then I feel like you're going to get a really good outcome.
Yeah, and just to add that too, whether you're buying or selling, right? I mean, the idea is just be prepared. I mean, of course, you don't have to do anything if you don't want to, but be ready, because even in this market that is a little bit slower, where you do have more time, you don't necessarily have more time to be ready. You kind of have a little bit more time as far as conditions and things of that nature, but you want to be prepared and you want to be ready to go. So if you're selling, but you don't want to put your property on the market before you see something that you like, well, your property should be photographed, like prepared for market, photographed, video,
yes,
ready to go at the drop of the hat, so you can put it on and then make the offer and that sort of thing. And buyers, you want to be ready too, because you still want to see properties when they hit the market as soon as they do.
You got it.
We just had an experience not too long ago where we saw a property on a Wednesday with buyers, and due to some of their own circumstances, they wanted to see it again but couldn't do it till Saturday, then found themselves in a competing situation that day. So there was some circumstances there that couldn't get around. But point being is, if you see something early, then you've got time to act. So if you see something early, you want to go back, see it as soon as possible, and then you have a better chance of being the only one there in a way.
You got it.
Okay, let's continue along here. So home buyers decision period, as you mentioned at the beginning of this comes into effect next year. So Galia, what is this?
Yeah, so the home buyer rescission period, it comes into effect January 3rd, 2023, and it's going to be implemented by the BC government to make changes to the Property Law Act. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to give buyers a 3-day window after an offer is accepted, starting on the next business day, to rescind their contract. So basically, you have 3 days in order to rescind your contract with no justifiable reason. Different conditions are subject, where you might have a week, 2 weeks of subject removal. And in that time, you have to remove your subjects. And if you don't remove a subject, you're allowed to basically rescind your contract, but you have to have justifiable reason. Now, if you do decide to rescind your contract within the 3 days, you do have to pay a penalty. And that penalty is 0.25% of the total purchase price. So let's say if you were looking to purchase a place and you wrote a contract and it was accepted for $1 million and you decided to rescind it within the 3-day period, you would have to pay $2,500 as a penalty. That money would be paid directly to the seller. Or if a buyer had submitted a deposit along with their contract that was accepted, the money would be taken from the deposit given to the seller, and the rest of the money would be refunded to the buyer. Now, this is for all residential property. It's not for commercial property. And this is for townhomes, strata, detached, etc. But it does have some exemptions over court order properties, auction properties, assignments. So it does vary a little bit here, but this will be coming into effect. And I think that this will change a little bit of the landscape for sellers and buyers when this does come into effect. Now, of course, the penalty isn't that huge. Nevertheless, it is still there. So I think it might deter some people from rescinding their contract. But basically, why it was put in place is that not in the market we're currently in, but previous 2 years, there were so many competitions and multiple offer situations, blind bidding, et cetera, for properties. So this was basically a consumer protection program in order to protect consumers from buyer remorse, overbidding on a property, not taking the time to do your due diligence. So this program was really put in place to help the consumers. So in that sense, it could be a good thing, but there's also a lot of reasons to believe that this might not help and actually cause some confusion in the market. For example, if someone was looking for a house and they put multiple offers in on several different houses, knowing that they were okay with paying the penalty and using the rescission period. So that's a situation that this could become tricky in. And yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Glenn.
Yeah, it's I don't know, it's an interesting one. It's kind of like, I mean, too little too late in a way, but of course, as we've said throughout this webinar, we are still seeing multiple offers today. I mean, it's rare, but we are. So regardless, you have this rescission period that's going to come into effect, and it's going to be for any whether you're competing or not. So yeah, like I kind of feel like it's a little bit of hand holding in a sense. You know, if buyer protection or consumer protection, but with a penalty, that also kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. Like, we're protecting you, but you got to pay a penalty. And to Galia's point there, you kind of need the penalty, or else people would just make offers on a bunch of different properties. And just, if they got a couple, then just rescind on the one they didn't want. So of course they put a penalty there to try and curb that. So yeah, anyways, it is certainly what it is. You know, new developments, there's a 7-day rescission period that's already in place. So it's not something that we're unfamiliar with, but you know, it's going to be on any residential property right now. I don't know, Britt, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I'm sure you do, but anything to add?
I think it's a little too late, to be perfectly honest. We saw this happening, and the government likes to do this. The government likes to implement these things that they think are protecting the consumers, but they're actually just going to make it really complicated. And I think there's going to be a lot of things that people are going to have to learn and understand, and it's going to deter some people and so forth. So I think, my opinion is that the government should have done a lot of things that they've implemented over the years. About probably they're usually 2 years too late, maybe even 3 years. So yeah. I think there's going to be a big learning curve for this one as well too. And I do think it will deter some people of not just, let's just go in and let's do it and let's tie it up, right? And there are buyers that do have that mentality of let's just tie it up. So it's going to take those out. But the people that don't want that, I think it's going to get confusing for them as well too. So
yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too, right? So you're still allowed to have conditions if you make an offer, and let's just assume you're not competing, so you have conditions. Even today, when we're seeing competing offers, some of them will have conditions, whereas before we would try and eliminate those beforehand, before the offer. But anyway, so you're allowed to still have your conditions. So if I make an offer today, being Thursday, maybe I have my subject removal date for next Monday, knowing I got a 3-day cooling off period. Well, what if I decide, and I don't know the answer to this, I'm just thinking out loud, but what if I decide I don't want the property within that 3 days, but I've got conditions. So I let the 3 days lapse, and then I don't remove conditions based on something that I've picked apart in the bylaws, for example. I mean, I would never advise this to a client. I think when anybody's making an offer on a property, it's because they absolutely 100% want to live there, and the conditions are there to protect them, to make sure that they know what's going on with the property before they move forward.
You got it.
So, I mean, so I don't know, maybe it comes down to people just being more prepared before they're making offers. And when you're competing for a property, if you get the property, there is a certain fact that you paid more than anybody else was willing to that day. So a lot of people are kind of like, oh my, whew, did I overpay? Because they got it. And then they have this feeling of like they overpaid, but you know, they did what they had to get the property. And then of course time goes on and then the prices go up and blah, blah, blah. Here we are where we've got a little correction going on, that sort of thing. So
Well, it's a good
anyways,
leeway into our forecast.
yeah, so let's move this along. So forecast and opportunities. So what are we thinking here? What are we thinking here, Brett?
Well, aside from us not having a crystal ball, but life would be very boring if we all did, because we wouldn't be having this conversation. But you know, I think there's also some you know, this marketplace itself and what's happening in the economy, there's some unique and extreme factors that are variables that are influencing the market as well too elsewhere. But I think it's fair to say that historical data is what is in this graph is the average sales price. So in the circles is where we've seen the dips, and then we see it go and it rises back up. So I think that it's fair to say that we're in a really in all of the worlds, we're in a pretty safe and desirable area of the global real estate market. And this goes to show in this graph itself. So historical data, you know, as you said before, real estate is not short-term. It is a long-term investment. And I think we've lost sight of that in the greater Vancouver landscape because of these highs that we have had. And we're only thinking about how much money that we've made in that year, rather thinking how much have we made in 3 to 5 years, or even 5 years for that matter. But if we look at the lows here, we see that it does go up. So I think it's fair to look at historical data in this and show that we're in a correction right now. And, you know, with interest rates, we're trying to curb inflation. And until that time, until we curb inflation, then we'll see interest rates likely plateau and go down in the next 1 to 2 years. And will we see the market rise up again from the data that we've seen? Yes. It will rise up again. It's just a matter of when. So you've got to look at your situation, what you're comfortable with, what job that you have, and so forth, and reach out to, you know, the experts around you as well to help you.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think in all these dips here that we've seen, you know, there was the frenzy around, oh, the market's bursting, or, oh, it's going to be downhill from here. And I think what we've seen when you're looking at this over, you know, 25 years, 20 years is how cyclical the housing market really is in, you know, the greater Vancouver area. So obviously, like Brittany said, it would be great if we had a crystal ball to see the future, but based on this historical patterns, we can expect that it will be cyclical again.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you know, if we look on here in interest rates versus the housing price index, if we look at did you lose me? Oh,
we got you.
No, you're there.
My screen of like technology. When interest rates, if you look at when interest rates go low, you see the housing price index go high. So you can see when it's the lowest it was between that 2020 and 2022, look at the housing price index. So interest rates definitely have correlated with our ups and downs of our market, right? And here we are in this. I think the correction right now is normal for what's happening in the marketplace right now around in the world, and also with the interest rates. And I think when we dive a little bit more into the interest rates, and that's what's really, you know, sparking this correction in our marketplace, we kind of have to sometimes narrow it down a little bit. And you sort of look, so we've put out this little graph that just shows you. So the housing price index at the high was just, you know, almost 1.3 million. And right now in October, it's like 150. So we've set a down payment of 20% on both. The fixed rate was 3.99 in April, and now it's 5.54. And what do your monthly payments look like? So in April, it was $4,800, and now it's $5,200. So you're seeing a $400 increase in your payment. Mind you, let's look at the price here. You are paying about, you know, $125,000 less. So if we look at that $400, so you're paying around $24,000 more over the 5-year term than you would have paid in April. But also now you're paying $100,000 less, which means that you have about, about 100, I would roughly say around $100,000 more of equity in your pocket. And then when you're refinancing in how many years, because lots of people aren't doing a 5-year term right now, they're doing a little bit less, banking on, that interest rates are going to go down in 1 to 2 years. Then they're going to refinance probably at a lower rate, which makes their payment a little bit closer to what the April rates were. So this is just to give you an insight about, real estate is a long-term gain. And likely if you do buy in this day and age right now, is that you're likely going to have more equity in your pocket in 3 to 5 years. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like what we're trying to do is help people make, a smart decision, right? I mean, everybody's situation is different. So this is kind of like, if you have a secure job right now, and if you have the capital, then now could be a very smart time. Now that, with the rise in interest rates, due to trying to slow inflation, and they're predicting that the rates will start to come back down in 12 months. Of course, that's a prediction, and things can change, right?
Yeah.
But like Brittany was saying, is what most mortgage brokers are advising right now is go into a 2-year term. So if rates, like in December, rates are probably going to go up again, and then hopefully they're going to plateau, and they'll probably go up another 0.5. That's what's the water cooler talk is. And then maybe after that they'll plateau a little bit before they start coming back down. But so most mortgage brokers are recommending a 2-year term, which could be higher than the 5.54% there for today's 5-year fixed. But the plan is to have the shorter term. So if the rates do come back down, or when they do come back down within that 2-year time, then you'll be able to refinance, get that lower rate, but you'll benefit from the rise in equity, because as we've seen in this chart, as interest rates go down, values go up, right? Now, not 100% every single time, but certainly the majority of time. And we've just witnessed it with the rise in interest rates and the decline in value. And those rates, of course, came up to kind of curb inflation. So point being is, right now, if you're in a good spot, could be a very smart time to enter the market, because you're going to gain on the equity of it, side of it. And I think even when people were competing for properties so readily, everybody was focused so much on the rate, like, oh my God, this is free money, this is so cheap, holy smokes, we got to get a place. And then the fear became, if they didn't buy today, they could get priced out tomorrow, because prices were going up so quickly. But now, and that was a seller's market, so many buyers in a seller's market. And now with the rise in rates and the prices going down, buyers seem to be a little bit frozen. They seem to be a little bit stuck, because I think they're like, oh my gosh, well, what if rates go up more? Like, our price is going to come down more. They're a little bit sort of frozen. So, I think at the end of the day, to Brittany's point about this being a long-term investment, now is a smart time for a lot of people. Maybe not everybody watching this, but it is for a lot of people if you're in that position. So again, I think it just comes down to being prepared, speaking with your realtors, mortgage broker, just getting everything ready to go and see what that looks like, and not sort of cherry picking media articles that they confuse me half the time too. And I've been in the business for a really long time.
Yeah,
so.
I agree. It's usually the headlines and so forth. So we don't want to be those realtors with the rose-colored glasses and, everything's going to be roses, sunshine, and butterflies. We just, you have to sort of look at the whole picture, right? And if it makes sense for you. So we understand that the market we have seen adjustments, but remember, they're healthy and necessary, and they shouldn't be scary because of where we're at. And if we look at historical data, it will show us what type of trend that we will go to, just a matter of when, right? So you have to pick and choose your right time. Is it a good time for you? Remember, there's always people that have to buy and sell in the market. We can't wait forever, right? We have things that change in our lives and so forth. So run the numbers, talk to your expert, and see if it's the right time for you to jump in.
Yeah. And maybe I'll just leave you with this little tidbit too, right? People that bought a year ago, they're still doing okay. People that bought in the
Yeah.
peak, for sure, they've lost a little bit, but they're not going to be doing anything for a while. Anyways, when I
No.
bought my first property, that was the summer of 2008, multiple offer. But by the time I closed on it, there was the financial crash, mortgage crash in the United States that trickled down over here. By the time I got the keys for my place, and we're only talking like 300 and something $1,000, like low 300s at the time. By the time I got the keys for the place, the exact same floor plan of the unit that I had sold for 40,000 less than what I paid. So 40,000 on, 350 was, quite a bit. Now the place is worth over double, right? So, long term,
Long term.
Yeah.
And the
that's
people
about
that
it.
bought at the peak also understood that they were to buy for a long term. I think most, hopefully, at least we were stressing this, is that if you're, we're at a high where we haven't seen the marketplace any higher at this point, and that if you're going to be in this marketplace, that you're to be in it for at least 3 to 5 years, 5 years or more, really. And a lot of the buyers that came in, especially in contact with us, knew that it was a long-term game as well, too. So, I think with all that being said, just pick your right time in your situation, get the right information.
Yeah. Okay, Golly, any last final words or?
No, I think you guys really summed it up there and left everyone with some good tidbits. And I feel like it's time for Q&A if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, if anybody's got any question, we've got a question for some of you guys, and this is just, we're just curious to know what stage people are at when they're jumping on our webinars. So just curious, are you planning on buying or selling a property in the next 12 months? There's a few options for you. So if you guys feel like answering that, I'll leave that there for just a second. We'll see. Okay, perfect. I think that's enough time, given how many people are here. Okay, and if there is any questions, looks like we have one. I don't know if I need to read this one. It looks like my buddy Ryan's on here and he's asking how I keep my beard so damn good.
No children, lots of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay, well, I think nobody's got any questions. So always, and these are anonymous if you do ask a question, but apart from my buddy Ryan there, I'm going to read his name. But anyways, apart from this webinar, certainly if you do have any questions, I mean, a lot of the information that we gave as far as, market stats and that, it's generalized. It just take absolutely forever to go neighborhood by neighborhood and property type and that sort of thing. So we feel it's very, very important that when you're getting information, it's based on your exact plans, the neighborhood you want to buy or sell in, the property type and the price point. So make sure you get that very specific information, because some places are performing, well, most places perform differently than others, right? So make sure you're getting that information. We are here for that. We're here to help, and we're happy to do so.
All righty. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks, guys.
everyone.